Well, we're fortunate today to have as our guest speakers Carmel Shute and Tara Mitchell from Sisters in Crime. For 30 years, come September, Sisters in Crime Australia has been celebrating women's crime writing, running exciting events, mainly in Port Phillip, nurturing authors, and having a great deal of fun. Co-founder Carmel Shute will tell all under a grilling from fellow convener Tara Mitchell. Okay, now about our speakers. Carmel Shute. Carmel Shute helped found Sisters in Crime Australia in 1991 and has been a national convener ever since. She was inspired by the new wave of feminist crime writers, including Sara Paretsky, who founded Sisters in Crime in 1986 at Bouchercon, the premier US crime writing convention. Carmel loves the combination of politics, suspense, good writing, and fun that women's crime writing and Sisters in Crime have brought to her life. Tara Mitchell grew up in Adelaide, aka strange murder capital of the world, which meant an interest in crime was somewhat inevitable. Initially unsure of how to translate this into a career, she qualified as an economist and administrator at university, but then decided against boring people to death for a living. They're her words, not ours. Finding the wine trade, the other great industry in South Australia, far more interesting, she found a new passion for fermented grapes, which has taken her around the globe. She's currently writing her first crime fiction series and scripting a true crime podcast. So let the fun begin. Over to you, Tara and Carmel. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pam, for that absolutely lovely introduction. And I'd like to offer a very warm welcome to all of our audience members joining us today. As a national convener for Sisters in Crime Australia, I'm thrilled to be here this afternoon to interrogate our founder and fearless leader, Carmel Shute, about her life in crime. We'll be in conversation for about 40 minutes with plenty of time for audience questions at the end. So here's your opportunity to find out everything you wanted to know about a life in crime, but were previously too afraid to ask. Now, Carmel, before we begin the interrogation, I need to ask you a few questions. Do you agree that you're here of your own free will?
More or less.
Do you agree to answer any and all questions posed to you by the interviewer and audience members today?
Yes, I do.
And despite the many questions you will be asked today, do know that you're not obliged to say or do anything unless you wish to do so, but whatever you do or say may be used in evidence. Do you understand?
I do.
Then I think we can proceed. So I'd like to take you back to a tiny town in Queensland where you grew up. I'd like to know about how your family and parents influenced your love of reading when you were small.
Well, it's fairly easy. My dad was my school teacher. It was a very small town. You know, it wasn't even a one-horse town. The horse had gone, and we didn't have electricity on, so no TV. So reading was the option, and my parents were both keen readers.
Fantastic. It's lovely to have that nurturing side of the family. So can you tell us about that encouragement of reading? So you went out and bought your first book. Can you tell us about how that came about and what the first book was?
Yeah, so this is my first book, Five Go Adventuring Again, the second in the famous 5 series by Enid Blyton. And I saved up 10 and 6 while I'm writing letters to the Gympie Times to Uncle Jim, GYM's column. My colouring was terrible, but I could actually get money for writing. And I went to Dorrans and bought it, and there was set the trajectory for my life, spending all my money on books, making a living by writing, and being obsessive about crime.
Fantastic. So moving then into perhaps your early adulthood and so on. So the rise of feminism came about, and there was a new breed of female crime writers in the 70s and 80s. and they were eschewing the traditional female victims or femme fatales that we generally tend to find in crime fiction up until that time. So these writers were creating heroes and anti-heroes, and they had their own damn bottle of bourbon tucked under their arm. So can you paint us a picture of how feminism and particularly, I guess, American crime writing, how that atmosphere influenced you at the time?
Well, as a young adult, I'd read Agatha Christie, but I was appalled by her class politics and snobbery. So when this brand new wave of crime fiction with people like Sara Paretsky and Sue Grafton and Marsha Muller came along, it was so exciting. And so I can still remember reading Sara Paretsky's very first book, Indemnity Only, which was published in the United States in 1982, but took 2 years to get here. Those were those days. And so there's a whole group of us who just were enthralled by this new breed of kick-ass heroines, exciting plots with things that said amazing insights into the lives that women were leading. And I was just over the moon with all of this.
And so what specifically was it about that you found exciting? Was it about that was you could finally see some of your own ambitions and thoughts about how women should be reflected in writing?
Exactly. So women had agency. They were out there solving things, not just being a femme fatale and wearing a low-cut frock. So that was really, really exciting.
But of course, they could wear a low-cut frock if they chose to, right?
Of course.
So as part of that fascination you had with those writers, you ended up on a little trip to America. Can you tell us about that particular trip and what you brought back from that?
Well, I was going to America, to North America, in fact, to a conference in Canada, and I thought it might be my only chance to go to North America, as it turns out with the COVID probably is. And I thought I should be a woman on a mission, and also I was a bit nervous about spending 2 weeks in America by myself. I was going to Canada to catch up with people and then New York, so I thought I should be a woman on a mission. So at that point, I was the union organiser for the old ABC staff union at the ABC, and the ABC had a fantastic program called the Coming Out Show, and non-professional broadcasters could make programs for it. So I proposed to do one on Sisters in Crime, which had been formed by Sara Paretsky at the Bouchercon in 1986, when she invited 6 women to breakfast. Well, 6 women turned up. So I organised that, and this is the days before the internet. I had to spend every night at midnight ringing America, trying to fix all this up. And so then I did a program which went to air on Good Friday 1991, and we promised the audience a feminist bibliography, which of course it hadn't done, but
doesn't sound like you, Carl, flying by the seat of your pants.
And the ABC got 176 responses in writing and by phone calls. And so we did the bibliography, and then we thought, oh, well, maybe we should set up Sisters in Crime. But it was always going to be a different organisation to the American Sisters, which was an organisation of women crime writers. Because at that stage, and I actually have counted them, I think there were literally, fingers of one hand, 5 women crime writers being published in Australia. So we thought it would be also an organisation for readers as well as writers. So we set it up. Well, I guess I should say, so we launched it at the Feminist Book Fortnight in September 1991 at the now defunct Democracy Club, which was a Greek club. And we had a debate, and it was all was about, of course, hard-boiled or not. And we had a really good turn-up. Kerry Greenwood, who was one of the 5 being published, was on the panel, and we took off.
So again, as you mentioned, it is the days before the internet. So what else did you do to encourage membership and get people to come along to these sorts of events?
Well, we got a bit of media publicity. We also did 4 programs for the ABC quiz show. That helped. We, distributed leaflets to bookshops and libraries and all of those old things that one did in the olden days. And we had really good events with titles like, how many feminists does it take to pull a trigger? Rigatoni or rigor mortis? How to plan the perfect murder? All of those sorts of things. Because we had to have these very general debating topics because we didn't have a lot of authors to come along and do panels.
For sure. Now, I do want to pick up on one that you mentioned there, the rigatoni versus rigor mortis. It sounds like there was a lot of food-based crime back then, and obviously myself being in the wine industry, I think you may have discovered an Italian wine way before most Australians knew of it because of a particular book you read. Indeed.
So my flatmate Kay and I were very keen on Don Leon's, but we're still very keen on Don Leon's Inspector Bernetti series set in Venice, and Inspector Bernetti, who eats fabulous food cooked by his academic wife, who runs home every lunchtime and cooks this magnificent meal for the family. And he drinks Prosecco, and we'd never heard of it. And so we sorted out at the Prince of Wales grog shop in Fitzroy Street and never looked back.
Fantastic. Now, this may be a bit of a chicken and egg question. You mentioned you're out there on radio, handing out leaflets, all that sort of thing. Now, you've actually, your career, as in your day job, is around PR. So was that influenced by Sisters in Crime, or were you doing a lot of PR work before Sisters in Crime became a...
Well, I wasn't officially employed as a PR person then. I was a union organiser, and then I was... did various things, but I did actually do, as part of my job at the ABC as a union organiser, because we're always in dispute with the ABC or the federal government. I always joke how we were either at the barricades, every winter against the ABC, or in bed with the ABC trying to lobby the government for more money. Anyway, so we did I did quite a bit of PR there, but not officially, really, just as part of my everyday work. Yes. It was only later when I went to local government that I became an official PR person.
Fantastic. Now, obviously, being in PR involves a lot of writing.
It does.
And so on. And so I wanted to ask you, now I can't believe I've never asked you this before in all the time that I've known you, have you ever tried your hand at crime writing yourself?
Oh, I did. I took long service leave and tried my hand at writing crime, but wasn't very good. I'm much better reading. Well, organising other crime writers. I think I'm much better at that.
Yes, I would agree that you're very, very good at cracking the whip and organising everybody else. So obviously, writing is a very daunting task, as you know, as I know, as many people would know. So perhaps writing a novel is a little bit beyond a lot of us. So Sisters in Crime came up with a unique way to encourage women to dip their toe in the water, so to speak, and perhaps start out with short stories. So as an organisation, we like to encourage people to enter their short stories. So can you run us through how the Scarlet Stiletto Awards were conceived?
Well, like many good ideas, it was conceived over a lot of wine in St Kilda, and we thought we should do something to encourage women to write crime, to unearth all that talent that we knew was lurking out there. And so we decided to set up the Sisters in Crime Scarlet Stiletto Awards. And it's now in its 28th year. And we've gone on to have 29 authors. In fact, there may be even one I haven't counted, 30 authors who've gone on to have won prizes in that competition, who've gone on to have books published, which I think is a pretty good innings. And we discovered people like Tara Moss. So she won the Youth Award when it was still open for people 25 and under, and she just squeaked in. The next year she came second, and by that stage she had started writing her Stiletto Murder series, which we always thought was a very nice homage to Sisters in Crime.
Absolutely.
We discovered Angela Savage, Velma Mcdermott got shortlisted, and that was enough to keep her going through 5 drafts of her novel, which is now, you know, a world bestseller and is being made into a movie by Colin Farrell. So it's been a very effective organisation. And I'll just show you, if you like, a couple of photos. All right, so this is our very first Scarlet Stiletto Award winner, Kate Kennedy, who picked up a notice about the awards at her local library where she was working in the country, wrote a story, then had a little bit of time before the entries closed, dashed one off, everything $2 on this rack about an op shop, and that won. The next year she won again, so then we had to introduce the Kate Kennedy rule to Scarlet Stiletto trophies, and you're invited to become a judge. In fact, the Age had to do the same thing, because now that she then became the doyen of Australian short story writers. And here she is at our 25th anniversary awards, presenting the Scarlet Stiletto Awards. And here's some other winners. So there's Ali Mani. As you can see, the shoe has pretty much remained the same design, but the style of the shoe varies. There's Jackie with the very punk one, Jackie Horwood. And usually what we've done is get these shoes from op shops. One was found in the gutter in St Kilda, which we thought was,
there's a whole story around that one. I'm sure someone could write.
Exactly. There's another style, Jude from Bridges from Western Australia, and that's last year's winner. That's a very, very, very cute shoe. It's satin with peepholes. And there's the author, Lee Redhead, who presented the Scarlet Stilettos, wearing her own Scarlet Stilettos.
Of course.
And there's our patron of the Stiletto Awards, the fashionista, Sally Brown. And as you can see, she's got a lot of red stilettos, and she very kindly donated them to Sisters in Crime.
How fabulous. So there's quite a bit of prize money associated with the Scarlet Stilettos, and it is open to all women writers. So I'm hoping that amongst our audience there might be a few writers who'd be encouraged to enter themselves. So what advice would you give aspiring writers in our audience today?
Start now. The competition closes on the 31st of August, as always. There'll be over $10,000 in prize money, and there's first, second, and third, and then there's a whole range of other awards. And so start now, think about it, make sure you spell check, maybe show it to someone and get their advice. And I would buy copies of the collected winning short stories. This is the first volume. We're now up to the 11th cut, and you can order those from Clandestine Press, and you'll see what sort of stories win. Writing a short story is actually pretty hard. For some people, they'd much rather, like our president, Lindy Cameron, write a novel than a short story, because it's a particular art form. So I would start now writing, my advice, and think of an interesting plot. For quite a long time in Sisters in Crime, the main theme was revenge of women against their husbands. So these middle-aged women usually would just be fed up. The husband would have put his mug after dinner, the after-dinner drink, on top of the dishwasher instead of putting it in the dishwasher. And that would just make her snap, dash out to the garden and pick oleander leaves. So broaden out from revenge themes against your husband is another piece of advice. And this year we're having a very new award, a resumption of the Best Environmental Story Award.
Well, that's very topical, absolutely. So,
Very topical.
So have we moved on from revenge? What's been the trend in the stories that we've received in the last couple of years?
There's domestic noirs, a story. The winning story from last year was World War II stories about women who pilots in Britain. History with Mysteries always comes up with some fantastic stories. So there are endless, iterations. They don't have to be women killing off their husbands. As one of our judges, Phyllis, once said, ladies, if you're of sound mind and means, why not try a divorce rather than grabbing the scissors and shoving it down his throat?
That also is good advice. So I do wonder how many women actually are prevented from committing any crimes.
Well, we say that Sisters in Crime performs a very laudable public service. If it wasn't for women having this outlet, there'd be a lot more dead husbands. And particularly now, my gosh, everyone's dander is right up.
Well, being locked up with people, that always escalates any kind of tension too, doesn't it? So,
well, it does.
So I expect we may see a few entries around COVID this year too.
Well, we did last year. There was at least 3 or 4 stories that I read that had a COVID theme. It will be interesting to see how that translates into writing this year. Yes, because now there's been a lot more COVID lockdowns since the stories closed last year, which was the 31st of August. So yes,
it'll be interesting to see how people have translated that to the written word. I can't wait to read them. And then we'll move on from the writers that are associated with Sisters in Crime to the perhaps for the readers. Well, we have the Davitt Awards, which were established shortly after the Scarlet Stilettos. So there's an absolutely incredible number of entries every year, and it's growing every year, which is a fantastic indictment on how well Australian women's crime writing is going. So for the readers amongst the audience today, there will be absolutely no shortage of reading material for you coming up. So can you tell us about the circumstances that led to the creation of the Davitt Awards?
Well, Sisters in Crime decided to celebrate its 10th anniversary with She Kilda, which was held fittingly at St Kilda Town Hall in 2001. And we were pretty jack of the fact that women crime writers virtually never got a run in the Ned Kelly Awards. So we decided to set up our own award, the Davitt Awards, named after Australia's first crime writer, or the crime writer who's published the first full-length crime novel, Alan Davitt. And we got Christine Nixon to launch it. And back then, in 2001, there were 7 stories or books in contention. Mind you, we didn't include true crime at that stage. Mind you, there wasn't a lot of true crime either. And this year, well, last year we had 124. The year before we had 127 entries. That includes adult fiction, young adult, children's and non-fiction / true crime. So that's an enormous increase. And the standard of writing just gets better and better. This year alone, we've got 125 entries, I think.
Yes.
So that's amazing. And I know that you're going to be very busy being a judge.
I am going to be extremely busy. I have a very, very large pile of books next to my couch at the moment. So yes, I have the next few months sorted out for me.
Yeah. So, and what's been really interesting is that these women writers aren't just winning Davitt Awards. They're also now winning Ned Kelly Awards, the Thunderbolt Award, the inaugural Historical Novel Association of Australia Award, $50,000, thank you very much, last year, the Banjo Award, etc. They are just going gangbusters, and it's not just here, but it's everywhere, because people like Kerry Greenwood, Dervla McTiernan, Solari Gentle, they've got massive overseas audiences and they're winning prizes overseas, Emma Viskich, etc. It is so heartening. And I do like to think that Sisters in Crime has had a bit to do with their success, because we were able to convince publishers that women's crime books written by Australian women had an audience here in Australia, and they just didn't have to import the latest Patricia Cornwall or whatever. And should I just show you a couple of photos?
We'd love to see a couple of photos of the Davits.
Thank you. There's Christine Nixon with the Sisters in Crime t-shirt at the very first David Awards. It's in Kilda Town Hall. And here's a group of winners from a couple of years ago. There's Jane Harper. Jane Harper, wow. What a global sensation she's proved to be. There's Kerry Greenwood with her own David Awards, and she's at one of the David Awards, she also got Sisters in Crime's only Lifetime Achievement Award, which was a very, very special award. There's last year's winner, and that's our new style trophy, which we're very pleased with. That's Meg Mundell, who wrote The Trespassers, and it's an amazingly prophetic book because it's all about a pandemic in about the 2060, set on a sailing ship that's coming from Britain to Australia with a group of people who've been all tested and supposed to be free from the virus. And in that book, you'll even find social distancing. So she wrote that, years before we had to observe social distancing. My God, how about that?
That's both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. I need to go. I'm wondering what might come up in this year's David Awards that I need to look out for in the next couple of years.
And I've read the book and I thought it was splendid. Yeah, we're very pleased with the Davits, and I always try and read broadly, but just reading a good selection of Australian crime writers now is a very full-time occupation.
Absolutely. Now you mentioned about female authors just in general. I know that there's been quite a few female authors who've had to use their initials rather than their name, because there seems to be a perception amongst certain readers that women can't write good crime. I'd like to know your
Well,
comments
that's right.
on
Well, of course, Norman Mailer always said you had to have balls to write crime, but we've proved him wrong, I think.
Absolutely.
But there's still people like L.A. Larkin, who writes thrillers. Louisa, she writes under the initials because men won't read thrillers written by women, whereas women read books written by men. It's just a terrible prejudice. And there's P.D. Martin, J.M. Peace. There's just a stack of women, and it just shows you things haven't changed all that much since the Brontes.
That's sad but true.
George Eliot.
Yes. Not just an initial, a full male name had to.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, so hopefully we are changing those perceptions, because I have noticed that we have been attracting a lot more men, which is wonderful, being an inclusive organisation.
That's right. Men. And they always, when they come to one of our events, when we have events in real life, yes, they nearly always win the raffle on their very first outing. It's amazing.
They do. And we affectionately refer to them as our brothers-in-law, so we love having them along. So it's fantastic. Now, speaking of having people along, at both the awards, again, when we had live events and live award ceremonies, we've welcomed some quite famous authors and actors who have starred in crime shows on both the large and the small screen. I think you've got some photos of some of your
favorites. I do. Let me just... So we have been so fortunate. So one of our big favourites is Velma Mcdermott, who's spoken at 7 of our events, and there she is with the old Sisters in Crime t-shirt, old style, because we've now got a different thing on the logo on the back, and there she is with Lee Redhead and Angela Savage, adoring looks, and she is one of our favourites, and she did us the great honour last year of presenting our David Awards all the way from Edinburgh. There's Karen Slaughter, very appropriate name, just like Angela Savage or Carmel Shute for that matter. We were destined to end up in a life of crime. So she presented our David Awards and has been at another couple of events. There's Åsa Larsson, the Swedish crime writer with Sue Turnbull, who presented, most of our events for about nearly 2 decades before she went to Newcastle. Catherine McClements and Jenna Spears. The wonderful Sigrid Thornton, who's done a couple of events and also launched Scarlet Stiletto, the first cut. And there we've got some overseas authors at our second Kilda convention. Maggie Orford from South Africa on the left, Sue Turnbull, Vanda Simon from New Zealand, and the wonderful Sharmini Flint from Singapore. She writes the Inspector Singh series. They're very, very good. And who else have we got? Essie Davis, who of course is most famous for playing Miss Fisher in the TV series and the recent film. And there we've got the wonderful Nadine Garner, who presented the Scarlet Stilettos in 2010, which is where she is there, and last year as well. And isn't that the most lovely photo?
That is gorgeous, that one.
I can't, unfortunately, lay claim to that. That was taken by the local paper.
Oh, very nice. So, of course, unfortunately, with the way the world is at the moment, we have not had as many of those wonderful live events that Sisters in Crime is quite famous for in Melbourne. However,
Yes.
we have had the opportunity to move online, which means that people can join us as they are today from their lounge room in their Ugg boots or from anywhere in the world, pretty much. So can you talk us through what Sisters in Crime's done over the last 12 months to not only cope with the coronavirus pandemic, but also reach a larger audience?
Yes, it's been a blessing and a curse. So our monthly events here in Victoria, and also some of our events with our new chapter in Sydney and a new chapter in Adelaide, they've been able to go up on YouTube, which means that anyone in the world can watch them. And so, for instance, our Law Week event last year has had nearly 500 hits. And also we can tart them up a little bit, put a bit of music, photos, etc. for our big ones like the Scarlet Stiletto Awards and the David Awards. So that's been terrific. And also we've been able to set up a new one-on-one author interviews called Murder Monday. So we did 26 of those last year, where Karina Kilmore, one of our newish conveners, did an interview with crime writers from all over the world. We had Sara Paretsky, Velma Mcdermott again, Kathy Reichs, Anne Cleves, who writes Vera and the Shetland series, and then fantastic authors from all over Australia. And we're going to be starting those again soon. So they've been good because they're just, 15 to 20 something, 26 minutes in the case of Val. But they've been really good to provide a sort of a short introduction because, watching a big event on Zoom can lose its appeal after when you've spent all day on Zoom.
Yes. It can be quite challenging. So with all these events and so on, there's actually been some developments with Sisters in Crime Australia interstate as well.
That's right.
So a few of them have been a little bit more lucky than us in terms of lockdown and been able to run a few more events. So can you tell us about some of those?
Yeah, so we've got new chapters in South Australia and Sydney, and they've been able to have real live events.
I know.
We will be able to soon. We were hoping to go have a live event for Law Week this year, but our regular Law Week partner, the Victoria University, Sir Zelman Cowan Centre, won't be open by then. They're still closed. So we inquired about perhaps hiring their Flinders Street campus, or a room there, and we'd have to pay $3,000 to have it cleansed. So we're still Zooming.
Still Zooming for now.
But I have to say, in one respect, it's good in that we can include authors from all over Australia. So our Zoom event that's going up next Friday night, Toxic Families, that's got people from interstate, 2 people from interstate. Our event after that, which is called Vive la France, it's about crime novels set in France. That's got a Western Australia author. So normally we'd never be able to include those in an event. So it's you win some, lose some.
It is the silver lining, isn't it? That we can include people from everywhere. Because I know as an interviewer of authors, I've been able to interview people from Sydney, Adelaide and Perth at the same time and present that to an audience, not just around Australia, but around the world, which is just amazing. So.
And so we've had people sign up for our notification for our monthly e-newsletter, Stab in the Dark, from Canada, South Africa, UK, USA, Germany. I think there's one from Italy. So that our e-newsletter has replaced our old magazine, Stiletto, which I was just flicking through, and oh my gosh, that brought back some memories.
I bet it did.
A lot of the same people are still around.
We might have to scan some of those articles and pop them in one of our online newsletters, a bit of a throwback to the past, a bit of a history, which I think would be awesome. So how can people get hold of our newsletter and find out about what's happening with Sisters in Crime?
Well, they can just go onto our website, just search for Sisters in Crime Australia, and up it'll pop, and it'll give you an option of signing on to A Stab in the Dark. And that normally goes out, thanks to you, the last Sunday of the month. Sunday, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, Carmel, you've been at the helm of Sisters in Crime for 30 years this year. So, so what's kept you engaged and excited about the crime genre?
Well, there's always something new and exciting happening with what you read. And one of my top books for this year so far, and it's reviewed in today's Age, is The Family Doctor, and that shows us and shines a very timely spotlight onto domestic violence and how one ordinary doctor, family doctor, ends up taking matters into her own hands. And you can just see it happening. It is so fantastic. So that's what the ideas that people have in their novels. I do read sometimes people give me other books, non-crime books to read.
Oh goodness, you find time to read them.
I'm nearly always disappointed. Anyway, so a crime almost always keeps me entertained, engaged, thrilled. Like, for instance, after reading L.A. Larkin's latest book, Prey, I virtually couldn't sleep all night, which is not perhaps the best recommendation, but...
I actually think that's an excellent recommendation, because that is, I guess, that is the whole point of crime, is that we're living vicariously through someone else, and perhaps crime fiction is a better way of experiencing that than perhaps true crime, because true crime, there's not always a resolution, there's not always justice, whereas crime fiction, there's quite often a satisfying retribution. Would that be true to say that?
Absolutely. It does give you the illusion that justice can be achieved, or at least a sort of, if not a formal justice, some sort of justice can be achieved and the world is put to rights.
Yes.
But as we know, that's much easier to do in fiction than real life.
Yes, absolutely.
Can I just say the other thing about Sisters in Crime is that, generally speaking, the writers are incredibly warm and generous bunch. They're not they're a much more different crowd to the capital L literary crowd, I'm informed. Even nicer than romance writers, I'm informed. But you can combine both, of course. That's the thing about crime. It's a broad church, you know. You can, like, if you've read a particularly gruesome book, you know, you can go and read a culinary crime book where you have recipes. I love those. Vicarious eating and drinking. Or you can go on to read romantic suspense, where she always gets her man,
Yes.
etc. It's a very broad church.
Fantastic. Now, I've found myself, you just mentioned that crime writers tend to be the nicest people because they can put all their angst on a page rather than taking it out on other people. So I'm keen to find out, other than perhaps Velma Mcdermott that you mentioned earlier, what's been your biggest fangirl moment in meeting one of your heroes or writing heroes?
Oh, Sara Paretsky, without a doubt.
Yep.
So she came to Australia in 1994 and we had a big dinner with her. 600 people at Paran Town Hall on International Women's Day. So that was my big fangirl moment.
Lovely. Yeah, I have, I think we're almost out of time. So before we throw to audience questions, and audience, I would encourage you to get as many questions while you've got Carmel on the hop right now into
Maybe
the
can
Q&A
I just whip
box.
through my last lot of photos?
Oh, did I miss one? Sorry about that. We've got more photos. Yeah, absolutely.
I've got a few more. I'll quickly whip through them. So that's the lovely, we've had so many fabulous people present the Scarlet stilettos and other events. There's the wonderful Marta Dusseldorf, Velma McDermott, who I mentioned earlier. There's a recent event, our convener, Karina Kilmore in the background. That's a bit of an older event with Solari Gentle, Robin Bowles, Angela Savage, and PM Newton, who'd had a little accident en route.
Oh, yes, I can see they just had a bit of a bump on the head there. So
the next time she came, we were regaling the audience about this, and then she fell off the stage. I couldn't believe it. There's a Law Week event, a very happy audience at Law Week. Oh, this year we're having our 15th Law Week event. We often run launches as well. There's Ali Mani, quiz nights. That's a group of authors who appeared in the first cut. They're at the second She Killed Her. And we also have occasionally men involved, usually Dix versus Dame debates. And that was at our She Killed Her 3. And as you can see, Angela Savage has got a very big gun.
Yes, she has.
And Lee is impersonating a nun, a very naughty nun.
Very naughty. That sounds right up Lee's alley. And
we like dress-ups. So for the event with Essie Davis, we had the 1920s dress-ups. For the 2019 event with Geraldine Hakewell, who does the series Ms. Fisher's Murder Mysteries, modern murder mysteries set in the 1960s. We had 60s dress-ups.
We did.
The winning
a fabulous night.
I'll say. And then that's a more recent outing to, in fact, that's our last in-person outing, which was to see Miss Fisher and the Crypt of Tears at the Sun Theatre. And there's Tara looking very fetching on the left. And this is another thing that we've done at some of our conventions. We had a competition with people invited to write a story about a dead body. This was the body, Manny Quinn, the body in the pool, and the winning story, you know, that would fit on a postcard. Got a big prize.
Fantastic.
So that's the last of my, that's the last.
I'd kill for a good read.
Good read.
We have those tote bags, I believe.
We now have that on a tote bag, yes.
So that second last photo is the absolutely perfect segue into my final question for you, Carmel. So with all your reading over the last several decades, what's the ideal way to hide a body?
Oh, to hide one.
Dispose of one, hide one.
I think probably into the sea.
As far out as possible?
Far out as possible.
Fantastic.
Off a cliff into the sea.
Perfect. I'll keep that in mind for
And
next time.
And the Shetland Islands are really, really good for this, apparently.
So our lovely audience, I hope you've learned a few things, not too many things from Carmel, I hope. So I think we're going to go back to Pam now for some audience questions.
Well, thanks very much, Carmel and Tara. That was a great deal of fun. It was lovely. I thought I might start by a comment from an audience member who did say, "I'm pleased my wife isn't available to watch this. I'd like to live a few more years."
So we won't tell her that this is available recorded later on?
Just tell him that he should check the garden. Is there any oleander or foxglove growing? If so, remove immediately.
Exactly. So one of the questions is, well, how do you see this fascination with crime? I mean, you've obviously been incredibly successful in attracting heaps of interest from well-known celebrities, but also from would-be writers and readers. So what is the fascination with crime?
Do you want to answer that, Tara?
Oh, look, but personally, you see the headlines of terrible things that have happened, and I guess just understanding how these things have happened and what shaped people to become who they were, whether it be the victim or the perpetrator of a crime. I find that sort of thing fascinating because my normal life is pretty. I have nice friends. I go to dinner, and I don't know any murders personally that I'm aware of. So just to understand how someone so different from me actually operates, I think that's a fascination for me.
So where do the crime writers get their inspiration? Is it like, as you said, they see news headlines? What, in your experience, what are they drawing on? Their own lives? Families?
I think they draw on everything. But if you, I think there's actually a blog on the Citizen Crime website at the moment, which is about how headlines can give you inspiration, or not just newspaper stories or stories in the media. But I think people draw on all sorts of things. What happens to their own lives? What happens to their friends? They take their inspiration from everywhere, or issues like climate change. We've had some terrific things on climate change, fracking, etc., etc. So there's just, the world is an endlessly fascinating place, I think.
So what are the ingredients then of a successful crime novel in your estimation? What makes it good?
Well, you have to entertain. You've got to be very entertaining. You should, ideally it should be a page turner. It should have characters that are interesting and issues that grab the reader's attention. So I mentioned earlier Louisa Larkin's or L.A. Larkin's book Prey. Now, I would normally not have thought that that's something that I'm wildly interested in. It was about the wildlife trade, particularly in rhinos. But, it was so fascinating and just grabbed you and kept you propelled along. So I think, and also knowing how to end a book is really important. You've got to know, and I do think that people do yearn for a bit of the world put to rights in some way or other, even if it's not in the formal justice system, because we know that's pretty limited.
Well, given recent events in Canberra, especially in our federal parliament, do you think there could be a potential crime novel that emerges from some of these events?
Well, I've actually said over the last 2 weeks, every day there's some new shocking angle to the story, and that if you put it in a crime novel, people wouldn't believe you. So I'm sure it's crime in a ministerial office is going to be a theme at some stage or other.
Agreed.
So just very finally, so would you say writing crime does pay?
Well, it can pay, but it doesn't always. So if you hit the jackpot like Jane Harper has, or Gertler McTiernan, and or Kerry Greenwood, it can pay. But most crime writers have to have another job. The Australia Council is very loath to give out grants to crime writers because it's genre fiction and it's not worthy. And so I think most crime writers have to have another job because they can't survive otherwise. And most crime writers don't make a lot of money from their books. Unfortunately, we'd like them to.
Still, there, as you pointed out, there have been a few that have done really well. So if they
have. Yeah. And sometimes it's just the luck of the draw because you happen to find a topic that taps into something in the zeitgeist. Like, for instance, Deborah Oswald's book, which I predict will sell a mozza, the Family Doctor. It's just of the moment. So it's going to be really, really popular, and I could see it being made into a TV series. And, with good reason, because she also did 5 series of Offspring and is a playwright and it's got the most incredible CV. So it's also good if you can have it go to the small screen or the big screen. For instance, Leanne Moriarty, I forgot to mention Leanne.
Oh, well, she's a winner.
Big Little Lies, yeah. Not every day that Nicole Kidman rings you up. Which is what happened to her. Oh, come and have a coffee with me, darling.
Never in my case, but obviously one can live in hope. Well,
Yeah.
we're just about out of time. And can I just say, Tara and Carmel, you have been fantastic speakers taking us into this new world. Well, it's not so new, the world of sisters in crime. And we really appreciate you giving us time. So thank you for being informative, entertaining, and giving some of our people perhaps some good ideas for writing. And can I also thank our volunteer IT expert, U3A Port Phillip member Jude Hatton, who's handled the technology for this seminar. And to you, the audience, thanks very much. I hope the man who wrote you is feeling okay at the moment.
Just check the garden.
Yeah, good advice. So in April, we have our next seminar. It's on April the 24th, and it's not to be missed because it's with the very eminent Barry Jones. But
wow.
Wonderful.
Thanks again, Carmel and Tara. You've been wonderful.
Thank you for having us, Pam. It's been an absolute pleasure.
A good crime is had by all.
Okay.